The Office of Hawaiian Affairs has launched statewide community presentations on the military lands lease issue across the āina. We did our presentation on the eve of Thanksgiving in Hilo and had a crowd of over 100 people that showed up at the University of Hawaii Hilo to see our presentation and the information that we have to share, and then the opportunity for us to hear from the community on Moko Kiawe about how they feel about the military lands lease issue, not just as it relates to Pōhakuloa, but as it relates to Makua Valley, Pacific Missile Range Facility at Barton Sands, and other military land leases that exist throughout the state of Hawaii. A lot has changed just in 3 weeks, and this presentation has changed. And so what we presented in Hilo has changed a little, and it will change. It will continue to change as this issue evolves, as the governor makes different decisions, as the military makes different decisions, as the Congress makes different decisions. And as I understand it, the National Defense Authorization Act was sent to the president's desk tonight for signature. If he has not already signed that into law, he will very, very quickly. And the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is named in the National Defense Authorization Act as an NHO, a Native Hawaiian organization that mandates the Department of Defense to consult with both the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and or the Department of Hawaiian Homelands as two recognized NHOs in the nation. That's a big deal. And it gives OHA standing on this issue, along with all of you as our beneficiaries. And so it's our pleasure and honor to be here tonight in Māʻili and in Waianae to present you this presentation that we have. It is content heavy. There's a lot of information in it. This is not an issue that we can just blow through in 10 minutes because there's a lot of history that's involved. It's important that we have a good foundational knowledge of where we were, how we got here today, and what the future might hold for military lands here in Hawaii. And so generally our plan tonight is to get through the presentation and the content that we have, the information we want to share, and then jump to the opportunity to listen to you, because listening is really important for not just OHA, but for the other leaders across the state of Hawaii that are here tonight. We have members of the State House that are here and other elected officials, and also those that are watching this live stream, because make no mistake, they are watching. The executive branch is watching, the military is watching, our legislative colleagues are watching, our other OHA trustees that can't be here tonight are watching, and we hope that people in throughout the community are watching. And so I want to introduce, and I'll allow her to do her introduction, but our Director of Advocacy at OHA is Lena Alale. She's been with us for about a year now. She leads a team that leads the advocacy division for OHA, and so I'll let Lena Ala give her own introduction.
Can you hear me? Do I need the mic? You need the mic. You need the mic. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Aloha, mahalo for having us. I'm honored to be here in the community tonight. My background is as a litigator. I started my career at the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation doing Native Hawaiian rights. I spent a few years in private practice, and then I was at Earth Justice for the past 6 years doing environmental issues, primarily on behalf of community groups. So the background and the passion I bring with me to this conversation is really doing āina-based work and elevating the voices of community. And I have done it in my professional life within the legal and political constraints that we live in. But my goal is to make change and to be sure that community is empowered and able to achieve our goals. So I'm really happy to be in conversation with you all tonight. Chair mentioned I oversee our advocacy department at OHA. So what that means is our public policy team working on legislation to benefit Native Hawaiians, and also our compliance team that enforces laws that are already on the books. So participating in forums you're all familiar with, like the EIS on the military lands for Oʻahu. That's our compliance team that leads the comments, talks about kapaakai, talks about archaeological inventory surveys, talks about iwi kupuna, and makes sure that we hold other state agencies accountable for doing their jobs and respecting Native Hawaiian rights. So that's a little bit about me, and mahalo again for having us.
Thanks, Lena Ala. And as the slide says, my name is Kai Kahele. I represent Hawaii Island as the Hawaii Island trustee on the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Also serve as its board chairperson. Prior to my time at OHA, I was in the United States Congress for one term, where I served on the House Armed Services Committee that worked on 2 National Defense Authorization Acts. And so I have deep knowledge and experience on that. I served in the Hawaii State Senate for 5 years. I chaired the Water Land Committee, which is a really of this issue. But I also serve in the United States Air Force, and I have been since I commissioned in 2001. And I still am in the United States Air Force today as a lieutenant colonel at Hickam Air Force Base. Degree. And I went to the United States Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and I spent 2 years there, both here in Hawaii and at Carlisle, learning about strategic land power in the Pacific and how the Army thinks about their role in the Pacific as it relates to strategic land power. And I learned a lot there. And some may wonder, like, how could someone who serves in the United States military, is a native Hawaiian, also lead the negotiations with the office, representing the Office of Hawaiian Affairs on such an important issue? I come from a family that has deep personal ties to Moko Keawe and to the military. My dad served in the United States Marine, in the Army and the Air Force. And so and service to our community has been very important in our families' lives. And so the way I look at it is, my experience as a military officer, the almost 25 years I have in the United States Armed Forces, along with the other experiences that I bring to OHA, complement and strengthen OHA's position on this particular issue. Because I've been able to work on things, I've been able to work on both sides of the aisle on pieces very, very important to this issue. And so for me, it's this is important. And I'm honored to be able to work with the rest of my trustees on positioning OHA and working with community and doing events like this so that we can educate, empower, and inform community. So we can give you a voice on this issue, because your voice ultimately is what should matter. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to our next slide. And I think throughout the course of this night, Lena Al and I will just be going back and forth on working on different slides as we work through this. If you can hold your questions until our presentation is done, we're happy to take them at the end of our presentation, and we're targeting to do that in about an hour. As far as administrative things go, if you're not familiar with this location, and we deeply mahalo the Kamehameha Schools for giving us this chance to be here tonight. Restrooms are down the hall to the right. If you needed to step out and take a break, we encourage you to do so. And so at this time, I'm going to hand over to Lena Ala to just give a brief overview on what is the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, because that is a question we have to struggle with when we meet our constituents each and every day, is what is OHA? Why does OHA even exist? What does OHA do for me? OHA doesn't do anything, or it does a lot. And Lena Ala will talk about what is OHA.
So we have listed at the top, can you hear me in this mic? I'll talk about that after. These are all the different divisions of OHA. But because we're talking about the military lands tonight, what we're really talking about is the crown and government lands of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So I want to situate OHA in the genealogy of those lands. So OHA is one of the outgrowths of the cultural renaissance, the political activism of the 70s that everyone in this room is familiar with, when Native Hawaiians looked around and said, wow, the federal government promised us Hawaiian homes in 1920, but look, there's not very many people on the lands. And look, the Admissions Act in 1959 promised us that one of the purposes of the Public Land Trust of Hawaii was the betterment of the conditions of Native Hawaiians, and where are those revenues and what is happening? So OHA was one of the answers that the community and the leaders in our kupuna of that time came up with to say, Native Hawaiians, let's take our own future into our hands, and we're going to create this agency, and it's going to be in the Constitution of Hawaii, and that's what happened in 1978. And this is going to be the trust, receptacle, and vehicle for those revenues that were promised to us, and that's what it says in Article 5 of Article 12, Section 5 of the Constitution. And Article 4 does something maybe even more significant, and it talks about the public land trust, and it says the general public is one group of beneficiaries and the other is Native Hawaiians. And Native Hawaiians have rights and entitlements that arise from that relationship. And ʻOha is a fiduciary agent for Native Hawaiians, and we have, as an agency, responsibilities to you, and we have responsibilities enshrined in the Constitution for how we protect these lands. We receive revenues that must be spent on behalf of the community, but we also are one of the guardians of āina. And we have the right to receive āina, and we have the right to advocate on behalf of the community for the protection of the Crown and government lands of the Hawaiian Kingdom that are preserved in the public trust. So that is who ʻOha is constitutionally and how we relate to the government, the Crown and government lands that we're going to be talking about tonight. And do you want to talk about what we do on a daily basis?
No, I don't think we need to do that. But I think what is important is ʻOha is a creation of the state of Hawaii through its people. In 1978, it is enshrined in the state's constitution. So ʻOha has constitutional power that is greater than statutory power, but it is a state of Hawaii constitution. Over the course of the last few decades, ʻOha has been recognized at the federal level as one of a few very important agencies that represent the voice of the Native Hawaiian people. So the Native American Graves per NAGPRA. ʻOha is a designated NAGPRA must consult if there's iwi kupuna issues or NAGPRA issues. Just like I mentioned earlier, in the NDAA, ʻOha is now named in a federal law as a Native Hawaiian organization that the Department of Defense must consult with. So even though we don't have statutory or federal constitutional power, we are recognized by the state of Hawaii with constitutional power. It's a separate autonomous entity from the other three branches of government, which is unique in Hawaii: legislative, executive, judicial branch, and ʻOha. And by being recognized through different legislative acts at the federal level, ʻOha is and has that standing on this particular issue. So I think that's the most important thing about the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Next. Okay, Leina Ala is going to walk us through a historical foundational setting of land, because that's what this issue really is about. It's about land, it's about control, it's about power, and that fight has been going on for over 100+ years in these islands. And one of the major issues on this issue is the Crown and government lands of the Kingdom of Hawaii. So Leina Ala is going to start where it really begins in 1840, when Hawaii becomes a constitutional monarchy under Kauikeaʻuli.
And I'm going to start with this quote that folks might be familiar with already, because we talk about trust duties and we talk about it, today it's Western law, but we have the Hawaiian view, which is very similar in the first constitution, stating that Kamehameha was the head of the government, and to him belonged all the property of the islands, but it was not private property. It was managed by him and the ali'i on behalf of all the people in common. And that's the statement of what is a trust relationship. And it was the same sort of relationship, although in this sense it was familial. And we have that kind of origin and Kauikeaʻuli's vision for the mahele, which unfortunately we all know didn't pass this way, but his vision was that the land would be divided and it would be protected in private property form, with a third going to the mo'i, a third to the ali'i, and a third to the makainana. And that's not what happened, but that continued to inform the nature of the Crown and government lands. Kauikeaʻuli got first choice. He took the lands that were meaningful to him and his family, and he immediately gave the majority. He gave 1.5 million acres immediately to the government of the Kingdom of Hawaii for the upkeep of his people and his government at that time. And he kept the smaller portion, a little bit less than 1 million acres, for himself. And so that is the origin of the Crown and government land. It is to take care of the Kingdom of Hawaii and the people of Hawaii. Of course, what we see is the mahele, unfortunately, accelerates these twin forces of outside capitalism and really military expansion and colonialism that's moving over the islands. And this culminates in the 1893 overthrow, where we see the oligarchy of sugar planters within the kingdom join with outside U.S. military forces and overthrow the government and seize for themselves the crown and government land that had been the focus of more expansion and desire. People want those land. People want the crown and government lands. So this is a watershed moment in our history as a legal seizure, of course, of the crown and government lands, the overthrow of our queen and sovereignty. But I did, I think...
Yes. Two things I think are important to point out. What was happening in the Hawaiian Islands since Western contact was happening across the Pacific, as European and Western imperialists and colonialists were moving across the Pacific and claiming lands for themselves. And that is why today, if you go to Tahiti, it's French Polynesia. If you go to the Cook Islands in Rarotonga, it's New Zealand. You go down to New Zealand, Aotearoa, you go down to different Papua New Guinea, they all have some type of European or Western influence. But the grand prize of them all was the Hawaiian Islands. And up until 1893, the Hawaiian Islands was still a kingdom, but it had major European influence and American influence in the islands. It had established a number of treaties with different foreign nations, but the United States of America, just prior to 1893, had taken a major role in the Hawaiian Islands. Through Kalakaua's reign, through Lunalilo's reign, through the Bayonet Constitution, reciprocal trade agreements for sugar, military use at Pu'uloa, Pearl Harbor, we see the shift to the United States in 1860 and 1870 and 1880, and it culminates in 1893 with the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
And circling back to where I started with Kaui Keoli, if you read Queen Liliuokalani's book, and she talks about the overthrow, and she talks about the quest to reclaim the crown lands that were taken from her, at that time she still talks about the lands are both for her family, their private property, but also the traditional role of the monarch and the mo'i to help the poor people and to uplift all Hawaiians, and that was part of her quest to get back the crown lands, which she failed to do. Eventually the United States court system ruled against her, but again, the crown lands were just not for her personal property in the sense that it is thought of in a Western sense, but it was also for her to help take care of her people, and that was part of what was lost, of course, with the overthrow. And we have up here with 1895, we have the merging of the crown and government lands, and again, that's significant because they're how they're treated today. They continue to be treated as this single group of lands, but I think it's important to always remember the origins of them, where they start. And of course, going up to the cession to the United States, I just want to highlight, of course, we have all the activism and the Ku'e petitions, and 95% of Native Hawaiians signing petitions opposing the Treaty of Annexation. And that's really part of the reason that we have this long gap from 1893 to 1898 before there's actually the transfer to the United States, because there's so much recognition from the activism of Native Hawaiians within the kingdom agitating for the return of the queen, that even with all the lobbying of the sugar oligarchy up in Washington, they can't get it passed until 1898. But we have this history, which is why today, or in modern times with apology resolution, the United States government can again say, we have unrelinquished governance claims to our crown and government lands. And the reason that is so well recognized is because of the activism and because of the petitions and because of our people making their voices heard, that they did not acquiesce in the overthrow of the government and the taking of the kingdom.
And this is a really important, critical historical period, because not only was the Hawaiian Kingdom illegally overthrown with the support of the United States military, the illegal confiscation of Liliuokalani's lands that trace their origin to Kauikeauli and the Mahele, that had transferred from mo'i to mo'i from the Mahele until 1893, that were also deemed inalienable by the kingdom's, whatever their form of the legislature was. They couldn't be alienated. One of the overarching goals of Sanford Ballard Dole in the 1870s was the merging of the Crown and government lands. It would take him 20 years to achieve it, but he would in 1895, when the Crown and government lands are combined together. And then you have what happens in 1898. And during this time, 2 treaties of annexation fail in the United States Senate. The United States decides to annex Hawaii via a joint resolution, which does not exist in the United States Constitution. And in 1898, the state of Hawaii, or the Republic of Hawaii, cedes to the United States title and fee for those 1.8 million acres of lands that were part of the Crown and government lands of the Kingdom of Hawaii. They were the public lands of the kingdom and Liliuokalani's personal crown lands. So the Newlands Resolution. The Newlands Resolution, and you know what, we have to say, for this is hard for us to get past 1893 and 1898, because for many people, it ends here. Everything else after that is illegal and has no standing. And we realize that. And that there are other individuals that are working really hard in the international arena, at The Hague and at different international entities on this particular issue. We are working on all issues. And that is why we brief after this as well. But the Newlands Resolution is really important. And why it's important is there another slide for this? Or is this it? This is it, okay. Why this is important is when the Republic cedes to the United States the fee and title for this 1.8 million acres of land. It explicitly includes language in the Newlands Resolution that recognizes the special nature of these lands and explicitly states that these lands will not fall under the existing public land laws of the United States that existed in 1898. That special laws would need to be created for these lands to benefit the inhabitants of the Hawaiian Islands. This is the origin of the Public Lands Trust. And it would appear again in 1900 in the Organic Act. So the fact that in 1898 the United States Congress realized the uniqueness of these lands, how they were acquired and attained, which was fiercely debated in the Congress from 1893 to 1898. The fact that they were ceded and transferred to the United States of America and enacted a special law overseeing these lands is important because it appears in the Organic Act and it is expanded in the Admissions Act, which govern these lands today. And just about every single military leased lands in this state, including Makua Valley, all of it, are public trust lands, are lands that trace its origins back to Kamehameha III and the Great Māʻili. And here's the Organic Act, and it does it again. The Organic Act it takes the language in the Newlands Resolution and incorporates it into the Organic Act created the territory of Hawaii's government, amongst other things. It's an important act because it establishes the government. It allows the federal government to withdraw lands for its own use, and it does, between 1900 and 1959, largely to build military bases and to create national parks throughout the Hawaiian Islands. It's a Volcano National Park, Haleakala, right? All those national parks become national parks through the Organic Act, and the power is given. It also creates a non-voting delegate to Congress. And again, it includes the language that unique laws would need to be passed and made to govern these lands because of the unique special nature of these lands. Next.
So moving through the timeline of what happens with the Crown and government lands after the annexation to the United States, we see the evolving recognition, not only in the land trust that Chair was just speaking to, but also with the passage of the Hawaiian Homelands Act, Commission Act, that beyond just the lands having a special status, there's also a special political status of the Native Hawaiians themselves. And this is where we have the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. It's passed in the context really of understanding that much like Congress has made laws and treaties with respect to Native Americans, they have that same power with respect to Native Hawaiians. And also, as many people know, going back again to the Mahele and the long-term vision, part of Prince Kuhio's message when he lobbied Congress for the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is that the Mahele, Native Hawaiians, Makainana, were deprived of their portion of the lands that rightfully belonged to them and were supposed to go to them. And that was part of the argument and the justification for the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So we have this evolving political status of Native Hawaiians, even though we've lost the kingdom, even though the islands have been annexed by the United States, there's this evolving political status. It goes through the Public Land Trust, it goes through the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, and then it comes full circle in the Admissions Act in 1959. And of course, I'll let Chair take over this one, but the public, or the Admissions Act, transfers land back to the newly formed state of Hawaii. And as everyone knows, it was subject to 5 public trust purposes at the time it was transferred back, one of which was the betterment of the conditions of Native Hawaiians. So we see again in another piece of federal legislation the recognition of Native Hawaiians and our status under law as having particular rights with respect to land and the land that is from the kingdom.
Yeah, and just like Leina said, and we have the Admissions Act here, so we spent some time at the Hamilton Library where the congressional archives are for every member of Congress that has served Hawaii, even dating back to the territory. And what you see here is the Admissions Act, which is, at the time, Territorial Delegate John Burns' copy of the Admissions Act. Everything we show you is all hung on OHA's website, on our military land lease page. So you can access them for yourself. But just like Leina said, the lands were conveyed in 1898. In 1900, the Organic Act was passed. And from 1900 to 1959, the United States of America took out, if I'm not mistaken, a little under 400,000 acres of land from that trust. 200,000 of it to establish the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act in 1920. Military bases, national parks. So in 1959, when Hawaii becomes a state under the Admissions Act, and this is Public Law 86-3, and like I said, this is John Burns' copy, and you'll see his notes here. You'll see his notes as he and his staff were working on this. The most important part of the Admissions Act, as it relates to this conversation, is Section 5. And he titles it as Title to Property. So you have Section 5A, you have Section 5B, which is land grants. So this is the land that was transferred back to the new state at admission. You have Section C, which allows the United States to set aside any lands that they determine they need at admission into the Union. Section D is the opportunity for a 5-year period for lands to be set aside, D and E. And then finally you have the Public Land Trust, which is Section F. And just like Leina said, there are 5 public trust purposes. The most important one is for the betterment of the conditions of Native Hawaiians as defined in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. As you can see, the N is a small n here. For those of us that understand small n, big N, Congress only intended through the Admissions Act that revenues or resources generated from the Public Land Trust would benefit Native Hawaiians as it relates to Hawaiians, defined as Hawaiians through the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which was a minimum blood quantum of 50% blood quantum or greater. These other 4 public trust purposes also are part of the Public Land Trust. The 5-year set-aside is really important as well, and when we get to Pōhakuloa, I'll show you a map and it'll make a little bit more sense then. But from the day this was, from the day Hawaii was entered into the Union on August 21st, 1959, a 5-year clock started to the day, August 21st, 1964. And that is a really important date in 1964, because that is when the United States is in the process of either transferring land back or leasing land. And the Pōhakuloa map makes it a lot easier to understand. But the Admissions Act is very, very important. It also requires that the new state take over the administration of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, because frankly, they hadn't done a good job from 1920 to 1959. So they condition, as a condition of statehood, the new state has to take over the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. That would eventually become the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. But there was a caveat in there, and it was, if you're going to make any major changes, you need the consent of Congress and our approval to amend the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And that has been done several times since 1959. Okay, Leinala.
So I think we can go through the remainder of these pretty quickly because we touch upon them again later in the presentation. But as Chair mentioned, there was that 5-year window or period of time where the lands could needed to be assessed if they could be returned to Hawaii. And in 1963, the congressional delegation realized, why is there this 5-year window that's going to close? There might be 10 years from now when the military realizes it doesn't have a need for lands that it had in 1959 when the Statehood Act was passed, and there should be a mechanism to return those lands to the state of Hawaii as was originally intended by many people, or that was an understanding among the congressional delegates at the time. So there was passed the Public Law 88-233 that we'll talk about a little bit more later. But really, this is a mechanism to allow us to get land back from the federal government that was taken during the territorial period before Hawaii became a state. And so it is something that we should all be aware of. The federal government doesn't get to keep land indefinitely if it's not in use for a specific purpose. And so there is this in federal law to come back to the state of Hawaii in whenever that land is no longer needed. But kind of the push and pull at the same time, the United States government, the reason we have all our 65-year leases expiring in 2029 is because they tried to pass a whole rash of them right before this 5-year period expires. So that's what we see happening in the period of 1964 is all these long-term leases being signed.
Might make better sense. So check this out. This is Pōhakuloa. These are all the lands at Pōhakuloa today. The green are federal, the pink is state. So remember that date, right? August 21st, 1959. Bang, 5-year window begins. First footprint during the Korean War is the Pōhakuloa military base, which is 777 acres, conveyed by territorial governor in 1956, before statehood. It includes Bradshaw Army Airfield and the base, what they would call today the cantonment area. So that is federal land conveyed by the territorial governor at the time to the United States in fee. Okay? The United States is leasing this larger area of land, over almost 85,000 acres. Statehood happens, the clock begins, and they determine we need this land. And so President Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, executes this 2 days before the expiration of the 5-year window and conveys via presidential executive order 85,000 acres to the federal government. They simultaneously, 2 days prior, lease 23,000 acres of state land from the state of Hawaii. On 16 August 1964. They leased these lands, they conveyed these lands through executive order 2 days later, but for some reason they decide to lease these lands. The majority of leases across the state are 16 August 2029. All the Oʻahu training lands, the PMRF lands, I believe are 2029 as well. They all have these 65-year leases on them. And just like Lena Ala said, it is a major concern of the federal delegation. And who is our delegation at the time? It's Senator Inouye. It's these guys right here. Senator Inouye, Tom Gill, Spark Matsunaga. And this is a joint letter that they sent to Robert McNamara, the architect of the Vietnam War, who was the Secretary of Defense in 1963. And look what they say. In the second place, we understand the military is asking for a 65-year lease, 65-year term in the leases on threat of an indefinite set-aside order. The delegation is concerned that the military is saying, if you don't give us a 65-year lease, we're just going to execute the set-aside, and we're going to just take the land. Because the Admissions Act allows us to 21 August 1964. And our delegation fights to prevent that from happening. Ultimately, they have to concede on a 65-year lease, but they are able to pass Public Law 88-233, which removes the 5-year deadline for land backing and the ability for federal lands at the time to be returned back to the state of Hawaii in perpetuity, and that still existed today. If there are federal lands retained by the federal government here in the state of Hawaii that are excess lands, they don't need them anymore. There is a process to return those back to the state of Hawaii. The one that comes to my mind most recently is the Pacific Tsunami Building down in Ewa Beach, under Bill Aila's time as the director of the HHL. And the federal government returned that back. And there's also a provision in the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act that allows DHHL to take on lands. Of course, we wouldn't want lands that are UXO lands and are not adequate for housing. But DHHL also has a reservation through the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act to get lands back. But that's how the map is the easiest way to explain how these things were all happening between 1959 and 1964. And why we're doing this today and why we feel that this is so important is because the challenges that our delegation was dealing with back then are the same challenges we're dealing with today. And the decisions they made then, and none of them are alive today, but we're here. And we have to live with those decisions. And we have to make the right decisions. So 65 years from now, hopefully not. But in the future, our children and their children can look back and be like, hey, they made the right decision for our people back in 2025 or 2029 or whenever the date is. So these decisions are really, really important. Okay.
So just moving really quickly through the last 2 points. State v. Zimring is the first post-statehood decision of the Hawaii Supreme Court affirming what we already talked about, which is the public trust duties of the state and the land being managed on behalf of the people. And this is the first time that the Supreme Court rules after statehood, and it has continued to be one of the best defenders of our public trust rights. We've seen lots of times when the state government has fallen down in its constitutional duties and responsibilities, but the Hawaii Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the public trust in our crown and government lands, upheld the public trust in water, really served to enforce traditional and customary rights. So we have a really strong and amazing body of case law in Hawaii coming from our Supreme Court, upholding all these responsibilities and duties that we've been talking about, because it's one thing to say it in the law and another thing to actually see it in practice. So our Supreme Court has been at the forefront of making sure that these rights and duties we're talking about are actually implemented and holding our state agencies accountable to make sure that they are actually acting in the best interest of the people and on the side of protecting resources. And then we talked about OHA's role and place in all of this. So I think we can move on.
Yeah, so I think what the big takeaway from 77 is that these are, and what we've already shared with you, these are unique lands. They are lands of the former Kingdom of Hawaii and they're crowning government lands. Zimring was a Supreme Court decision that explicitly stated that the state is a fiduciary, that the executive branch is a fiduciary to the public land trust, where the lands of Makua Valley reside. And so they just can't be bartered away. They just can't be negotiated away because you have fiduciary duties to these lands. And OHA is a part of that fiduciary responsibility that we share along with the other branches of government, legislative and the judicial branch. They all have a fiduciary duty to the public lands trust.
Okay, next slide.
Did you skip one?
No.
Oh, okay. Next. Okay, we'll jump through these real quick. Pacific Missile Range Facility, Barking Sands. They have several leases as well and easements. Their leases are also coming up. This is the United States Navy. The United States Navy also uses Kaula Island for live fire training. The Navy has not brought its EIS in front of the land board yet, but it will. They are working together with NASA on a additional piece of property up on the ridge line that NASA would like to utilize, and so that lease is up for renewal, and it's on the Mana Plain, and it is coming in front of the land board soon. And I believe they've already taken public comment on the first draft, and they are answering those comments, and will publish a second draft shortly. Next. Makua Valley, no stranger to this audience. EIS was rejected by the land board. Long history here in Hawaii. I don't want to pretend to know it any better than anyone else in this room who has fought for decades for the return of Makua Valley. Leina, anything else to add to Makua?
Nope, I think the experts are in the room. And
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of state and federal land, right? It has a long, long history, and I'm a firm believer, and can stand here proudly to say in front of you that I'm the only member of the Hawaii congressional delegation in history to ever introduce federal legislation calling for the full, total, complete return of Makua Valley and the cleanup of the valley, and introduce that bill in Congress. So that's something that I still have not wavered on, and I hope we're able to bring that to fruition one day, and maybe this is the opportunity to do that. Next. Pōhakuloa, went over that map with you most recently. There's something unique about Pōhakuloa, and let me pull this up real quick because this is important. So, like I mentioned, the state leased lands comprise about 23,000 acres. You have the federal lands here, you have the impact area here, and let's say the lease were to expire, the state decided not to execute a new lease, the United States military said, you know what, we don't need the pink areas, we're okay because we have the green areas, we still have the base, we still have the airfield, we still have our impact area, and we still have the Ke'aumoku parcel, which was purchased from Parker Ranch in 2006, that they had planned to use for the Stryker Brigade. Today they use it for a lot of landing zone and strategic airdrop training. But why these lands are so important is the live fire training that occurs here. The firing points for the HIMARS and the heavy artillery that are used at Pōhakuloa is why the pink area is so critical. Because they can fire from here, but that decreases the range and the training and the proficiency of firing the weapon system. So having the ability to have access to these lands is vital and critical. Why exchange or condemnation is deeply problematic for many of us, including OHA, is that at least if it is leased, as it has been for the last 65 years, the state through DLNR has oversight and control over these lands. The Ching case, Auntie Max, Uncle Clarence against the land board that the Supreme Court ruled did not manage that lease properly and hold the lessee, the United States military, to its lease terms. We would not be able to do that if this land turned green. We would have no oversight. We would have no cultural access. We couldn't dictate anything, except if the United States military wanted to. They would not be required to. So by maintaining this land under state control, allows the state of Hawaii to exercise oversight over the land. whether it's cleanup, cultural access, endemic native species, a whole bunch of different reasons. And that's why this land is so important for the United States Army and the Marines and the Joint Force that trains here and fires live fire weapons here. It is also why it's very important that this land stays under control of the state of Hawaii. We wouldn't be able to dictate any type of weapons that are fired from here or are utilized here. And that's a problem for the residents of Hawaii Island that live there, you know, many of us that call this place home. Next. So we already covered this. There's Kauai. The other Army training retention lands here on Oʻahu are at Kahuku and Paumoho. And then there's Pōhakuloa. These are not all the leased lands. There are others, smaller parcels throughout the state, but these are the most important ones that we're focused on. They start expiring in 2028 and they go all the way to 2031. So it's not just 2029. Next. Okay, live fire training. You know, OHA has taken a position that we are going to propose to our colleagues at the legislature, and we mahalo some of them in this room tonight, that we place on the ballot in the 2026 election a constitutional amendment to prohibit live fire training on the state's public trust lands in the state of Hawaii. And thank you. This overwhelmingly passed the Association of Hawaiian Civic Club convention, and we've brought it before our board, and we've approved it, and we have sent it. We're going to send it over to our colleagues at the legislature. And what that would do, it's very, very specific. It's destructive live fire training, kinetic or non-kinetic weapons that do irreversible damage and harm to the environment and the ecosystem. These are the two primary types of weapon systems that are used for destructive live fire training at Pōhakuloa. The heavy artillery 155 M777 and the HIMARS weapon system that can fire different types of munitions, but the munitions they fire at Pōhakuloa are non-explosive in nature, but they are kinetic in the sense that they are rockets, projectiles, moving at hundreds of miles an hour with a charge at the end that has a smoke charge so they can see where the weapon impacts, but it does major damage into the environment to the flank of Mauna Loa when it impacts the live fire area. So these are the two types of destructive live fire weapon systems that are used by the United States Army and the United States Marines and other coalition joint forces that train at Pōhakuloa. And Pōhakuloa is the only place in the Hawaiian Islands where this is utilized. Next. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, it is a big deal because live fire military training results in environmental damage, unexploded ordnance, soil contamination. There's been hundreds of wildfires. They've even documented the wildfires and admitted to them in their EIS, habitat destruction, noise and vibration impacts, cultural site damage, etc. And why this matters for our āina? It's because our āina is special. We have unique ecosystems. There are 26 rare, if not critical, both plant and animal species that live in the area of Pōhakuloa. They're fragile, they're endemic, they're fire intolerant, culturally rich. And we feel at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs that on public trust land that we control, the state of Hawaii, you control, the people of Hawaii, that today in 2025, live fire training should be prohibited in the Hawaiian Islands. Next slide. Legal frameworks. I'm going to hand this to our lawyer in the room.
So we go through a few different legal frameworks that apply here. And again, I know many of you have been in the fight for Makua Valley for a long time. And what I actually want to highlight on this slide is there's not just one framework. When we talk about condemnation, of course, we're under the federal government, we're under their system of law, and there's only one way forward. But when we're talking about land back, it's really community creativity that has led in this area. We have, of course, in addition to the example here in Makua Valley, we have Koho'olawe, which started not just with a lawsuit, but actual occupation, right, of the live bombing by the Ohana, and then followed up by the lawsuit, which the rest of the model, I think Makua kind of followed in the footsteps of you have a community-led lawsuit. You have an effort in the courts to put some accountability on the Army and to find out and disclose more of the truth about the impacts of the military activities that are going on. And then like we saw in the case of Koho'olawe, we had Senator Akaka come to the table and introduce legislation that really helped to follow up on the findings that came out of the consent decree and the lawsuit that Koho'olawe, the whole island, was a historic site. And Senator Akaka in 1990 introduced legislation to recognize it as a national treasure and to put a moratorium while there was a reserve study to see what can be done. And all those things added to the pressure where President Bush finally put in the orders in 93 saying we're going to stop the bombing. And then again, our congressional delegation moving forward with that important piece of cleanup, right? And getting the appropriation from the federal government for the $400 million, which as everyone knows was supposed to clean all the surface and like 75% down to 4 feet, and it ended up covering a much, much smaller level of cleanup. So even though we got Koho'olawe back, there's still not the complete access that the community deserves and expects. And this is one of the issues that the community here, of course, is very well aware of and is going to be facing with Makua Valley. We have this promise of return, but what does that mean when we have the problem of cleanup? But again, I think the important point about this slide is really the combination of all these different pathways coming together when you have a successful land back. So we can look at what the community's done here in Makua, we can look at Koho'olawe, and there's different ways that we can move forward. We can continue fighting in the courts, we can continue using laws. We talked about Public Law 88-233 and when that can be leveraged to bring lands back. And then of course, you know, we are now in that moment with lease renewal where there's an opportunity to really put the pressure on the government to re-examine its use of land in Hawaii. And that's what we're doing with Pōhakuloa, that's what we're doing with the constitutional amendment. We're putting that pressure to really make the Army look at what are its uses, what are its needs. Everyone knows here in this room, Makua Valley, at the time they said they needed it, they're never gonna give it back. And then you got the injunction from the court and they didn't get to train for the 3 years and they never did their EIS, and now look, 25 years later, we have them saying, okay, we never need to train here again. So these are really long-term strategies. And when we think of lease renewal, we think about the opportunity for land back now. But we also, I think, need to be aware if we can't get it back now, well, what are the other options? Can we do shorter term leases? What are intermediary steps that we can take so that this isn't just a once in a generation conversation that we have, but we more often have this opportunity to get land back for the community. So I admire everyone in this room who's been in this fight, brought these very creative frameworks to bear, and this is part of the conversation that we want to be having, is to continue to engage and learn, because there's not just one pathway forward when it comes to this land back process. I can keep going. I'll take this one as well. So this is, I think everyone in this room is also familiar and already engaged in this process. We had started down this path. The Army did its EIS and it was found lacking by the BLNR. I would say again with a lot of pressure from the community. OHA also commented on the EIS, the failure to conduct archaeological inventory surveys, the failure to complete biological and natural resource assessments, the failure to do a good kapa'akai and cultural impacts assessment and talk about in a meaningful way the impacts on our cultural access and practices. There's all these different factors that were led to the denial of the EIS, which was a huge victory. But of course, where we are now is there's still the actual, all these frameworks, that these statutes that have to be complied with. And what we saw was a governor kind to push past those and not hold the Army to account to complete all these different requirements. So one additional step that OHA has offered to take is to undertake the kapa'akai analysis and make sure, regardless of which lease we're talking about, which community that we're talking about, that there is a more complete accounting and assessment of what is the impact on our community. So if you did do our online registration, there is a question if you are a cultural practitioner in the area, if you would like us to do a follow-up interview with you. We want to have more information gathering and more of a complete document that presents all the impacts that the Army has, because we don't think there was a good job done in the EIS that was turned in and rejected earlier this year. And then of course there's all the zoning issues. But the real point of change here is the BLNR. That's where all the pressure is. That's who had the decision whether to accept or reject the EIS, and that's where the lease is going to come back if the Army keeps pushing through on that path. It's going to go back to BLNR, it's going to come before them again, and they're going to have to go through the same public hearings process, and the community is going to have to come out again at that stage and make its voice heard again on what are the lease terms that are being proposed. And that was one of the deficiencies that OHA also raised in the EIS. There was no talk in the EIS. They kind of punted the discussion about valuation, how much rent they want to pay, what exactly is the lease term. We would like to see no lease, most of the community, but there's also a big difference between a 25-year lease and a 65-year lease. And why is there no transparency about what is that lease term, what is that amount of money, where are those conversations taking place? And we really think that should be part of the public EIS process. The valuation process should be transparent. We have the question of, is there money owed for the 65 years where we were only getting $1? And there's a question about the cleanup commitment. Again, even for Makua, where they're saying they're going to give it back, what is the funding that is behind that? How can we hold the government accountable? The EIS punts it to future statutes like CERCLA, saying, you know, there's other ways that we'll look through this, but we think the community deserves to know now what are the commitments and plans being made with respect to cleanup, so that this promise to return land is actually real and just not an illusion or a fake promise.
Let me touch on a couple of things here. So on our website is the Land Board Chair, Don Chang's letter she sent to the Army on May 14th. And it's this letter here. And I would encourage you to read it, because what it does is it outlines all the things that the EIS failed to assess and ultimately why the EIS was rejected. And that would be, you know, in the staff's main concerns. And so it is on the Army to figure out how to address these deficiencies in their EIS. One of them being the Army did not assess the impacts of live fire training in the live fire area. And they didn't do that because they treated this as an administrative action. Even though you need our state lands to fire your weapons, you're not going to assess the impact of those weapons on the federal lands. Which, don't forget, that big green area was Crown and government lands. Just because you took them 2 days prior to the expiration date doesn't mean they're not ceded lands. Yep. They were ceded lands. They might not be part of the 5F Public Land Trust, which the pink lands are, but they are ceded lands of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Another issue with a new lease is shortly after statehood, when the new state was created and agencies like DLNR and DHHL were created, it passed a land use law, which created different land uses throughout Hawaii, one of them being the state's conservation district. But because military training was already happening in these areas during that time, it was grandfathered in as a non-conforming use. Well, that ceases on August 16, 2029. You cannot issue a new lease. BLNR cannot issue a new lease without a statutory and administrative rule amendment to the state's conservation district rules that create a special subzone for military training. That is a difference between these lands and the Mauna Kea Science Reserve at the top of Mauna Kea. Because in the conservation district law, a special subzone is created and carved out for astronomical use, astronomical purposes. That's why you can build telescopes on the top of Mauna Kea in the state's conservation district. But live fire training or any type of military training, period, is not allowed once these leases terminate. And it's the same way on Kauai at PMRF. They need a conservation district law change or a BLNR. BLNR is not going to be able to change it through the administrative rule process unless the legislature gives them the authority to promulgate an administrative rule to create a special subzone for military training activity on state leased lands. Does that make sense? Yep. So that's another major hurdle for the military and for the BLNR, because legally the BLNR can't even issue them a new lease unless they can amend that. Another thing that's really important is this 171.95. Chapter HRS 171 is like the heart of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. It even acknowledges the 1895 Land Act in HRS 171. But 171.95, most lease, BLNR cannot execute a lease longer than 65 years in the state of Hawaii. That is the limit. Yeah? That power sits with the land board. Depending on if DLNR wants to lease or exchange or alienate land to a government agency, a sovereign government, or a private entity is outlined in HRS 171.50 and 95. 50 to a private entity gives the legislature oversight over that transaction, and OHA must be notified within 90 days of the convening of a legislative session. But 95 does not. If the land board wants to exchange public trust land to the United States of America for any land that the federal government retains in fee, they can do that at the land board level without approval from the state legislature. We want that changed at OHA. We feel that the legislature should have oversight and a say on exchanging or ultimately alienating, dispossessing any public trust land that is under the authority of the land board to a private or a government entity. And that is something that our state legislators can address in this upcoming legislative session by amending HRS 171.95. Because there are still protections, Chapter 343, EIS, public has contested case. So there is a process, but ultimately, if the land board, through a majority vote, wants to exchange land with the United States of America, it can do it. It follows the process. The legislature has no say, yes or no, in that process, and we believe at least a simple majority of the legislature should have a say in a transaction of what we think is a reasonable acreage of land. What we don't want to affect is public housing and good public purposes. So one of the things to do is anything less than a certain acreage, legislature doesn't get involved. If it's 1,000 acres or more, legislature has oversight. I think that's reasonable. I also think OHA should be notified if it's public trust land because of our statutory and constitutional obligations towards the public land trust and OHA's pro rata share of those resources. So that's the lease piece, and there are some problematic issues within the lease. But if you want to read DLNR's record of decision on why they came to those findings and why they ultimately rejected the Army Training Land Retention EIS for Oʻahu and also for Pōhakuloa, you can read those there. Okay, next. Go ahead.
So this is really similar to what we just went over in terms of process and who is overseeing this being the BLNR, and like Chair was talking about the legislature and OHA not having that notice provision that we actually have when it comes to private land deals. But when we come to land exchange, there are more, I would say, constitutional defenses to a potential land exchange, because when we're talking about permanent alienation of land, that impacts other rights. I mean, a lease impacts rights, cultural access, like we've been talking about, traditional and customary use, and how the community can access land. But if you're getting to a land exchange, you're talking again about alienating land that is part of the Crown and government public trust lands to the federal government. And even if we get something in return, even if that land is of value, the land we're losing, we're still losing as the state and as a community certain rights that we have within that land. So I think if a land exchange were to come up, the community, ʻōha, would have more legal defenses really as to whether this is a viable option to move forward with. And we would, of course, go through the more technical points if this were to be something the community would agree to. But I think when it comes to alienation of land, there's always an argument that this violates not only Section 4, Article 12, but also traditional and customary rights, because again, we're going to lose the traditional and customary access and use rights if it becomes permanently alienated to the federal government. And finally, of course, ʻōha has a claim, as does the rest of the Native Hawaiian community, to any Crown and government lands because of our governance claims that we talked about earlier with apology, resolution, unrelinquished claims over those lands. And there hasn't been any final resolution of what our claims as a people to political governance over those lands. So really, pending resolution of those claims, can we be alienating land out of the public trust? That's another question that hasn't been decided, but is an argument and of course a moral concern.
This link right here on our website under important documents, the state legislature passed a House resolution this past legislative session that required DLNR to assess this issue and report back to the legislative session. And so this is a good document to download. It looks at all the different leases across the state that are going to expire. What I wanted to show you was this last paragraph here, which explicitly says that 171.95 is the controlling statute for any type of lease renewal negotiations or leasing process. So you should definitely look at 171.95, because right now it is just BLNR. There is no other entity that provides a check on that decision. Like I said, contested case hearings, EIS, 343, that process, but at the end of the day, BLNR can exchange land. And we feel that the legislature should have a say in that, as it does in 171.50 to a private entity. It already has that, but it is taken out in 171.95 to a government entity. The United States of America is a government entity. The city and county of Honolulu is a government entity. They're sovereign governments. BLNR can exchange land without any oversight from the state legislature. 171.95. Next.
So this isn't a path that ʻōha is currently pursuing, but we know that others in the community are active in the international realm. So we did want to recognize that international law is another form of law that speaks to issues that we face here in Hawaii. There is law governing non-self-governing territories and decolonization. There's laws related specifically to the rights of indigenous peoples and the right for prior informed consent and consultation with respect to decisions that affect their lands, which is, one of the demands we've also made in the context of the Federal National Defense Authorization Act is for consultation. That's a well-recognized concept in federal law, but also in international law, is the right of indigenous peoples to consultation on decisions affecting their lands. And of course, different international forums that talk about demilitarization. One of the things we did talk about at our last presentation at Hilo is just, of course, the power of the International Law Forum really depends on the political players at the moment. And right now, we know the United States is stepping back from the international arena and not engaging. So the extent to that we can get relief and whether the United States would respect a decision that was coming from an international body, of course, is an outstanding question, but these are other legal pathways that we understand others are pursuing.
Next.
Do you want to take this? Yeah. So this is, we kind of talked about this, we've touched on it in a few different ways as far as who ʻOHA is, what our fiduciary standing is with relationship to the Crown and government lands. We've also taken a position, again, that alienation of any Crown and government lands prior to the resolution of Native Hawaiians governance claims is inconsistent with our role. And we also have taken an active role through this process and engaging with community, and we're trying to put pressure on the governor, as many other groups are, with respect to the expedited track that he was advancing, that we feel like there's been some success in him backing down from that path. And part of the reason that's important is, of course, the outcomes, but really the process. We're emphasizing process and community and being sure that the community voice is heard in these discussions, and it's not just a closed door conversation between the governor and the federal agencies or the military agencies that currently hold these lands. So these are just some of the roles that ʻOHA has been taking with respect to the military lease question.
Yeah, I'd also add, ʻOHA has taken a very proactive role in the military lease lands issue, and the Board of Trustees is actually convening tomorrow at 9, and we are, on our agenda is the establishment of a permitted interaction group that is a negotiating permitted interaction group that will reach out to the various service secretaries that oversee these leases and put together a technical advisory group that can advise the Board of Trustees on this particular issue. And we're trying to be really thoughtful in who serves as subject matter experts on this permitted interaction group. We are looking for individuals that have technical expertise on negotiation, on land valuation, on aloha āina and kia'i, āina protectors, military expertise to provide the board with that perspective. Different types of experts that can provide the board with that subject matter expertise. And so we're in the process of establishing that as early as tomorrow and starting the conversations with those that are designated to represent the Department of Defense on this issue. Next slide. Couple quick slides. Role of the executive branch. There's a couple things I think that are really important. This Department of Defense Instruction 471003, which is also on our website, requires consultation with NHOs or Native Hawaiian organizations. ʻOHA is one of those designated in this Department of Defense instruction, which is also hung on our website. The Department of Defense, through its national defense strategy and ultimately at the state level, the national security strategy, outlines the role of the Department of Defense in the Indo-Pacific. And so that's a really important document as well. But what we do know is that the service secretaries do have the power of condemnation as long as it meets a valid public trust purpose and it follows a very deliberate process that the service secretaries can initiate. And we heard a lot of that in the fall coming out of not just the Secretary of the Army, but also from the administrative, executive branch here. But at the same time, we have seen the federal executive branch move in a different direction. As Lena Ala had mentioned before, it took like one paragraph and a memo from President Bush to the Secretary of Defense to stop live fire training on Kaho'olawe. It took a memo from Secretary Austin to the Department of the Navy to close down the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. So there are special and unique authorities and powers that the federal executive branch does through the Department of Defense and the President. At the state level, I think we've talked quite a bit about the Department of Land and Natural Resources and its Board of Land and Natural Resources, and the role that they have, especially in HRS 171. And then, of course, the governor at the executive branch level, is leading the negotiations on behalf of the state. But at the same time, he or she also has a unique fiduciary role to the Public Land Trust. And over the course of the last few months, the governor has engaged in several letters to the Secretary of the Army on various different topics, most recently creating an advisory group that, Bill, are you on that? Bill Isla is on that as well. I don't know if anyone else, Mahina Paishan is here as well on the Governor Advisory Group. OHA's Summer Silva serves on that group as well. And so, we look forward to the work and the voices that all of you bring to this conversation, especially as it advises the governor and his team. Next. Next slide. Oh, no, way back. Yeah. The legislative branch, the United States Congress. So this is important. The National Defense Authorization Act is the authorizing language that authorizes the different branches of the United States military, whether it's policy or programs or weapon systems. That is probably law already. The president probably signed it. I know Congress, the United States Senate, sent it to the president's desk tonight. Why this is important is in the Senate's version of the National Defense Authorization Act that came out in mid-October, there was a very important section in there that talked about land exchanges and land leases. OHA sent a letter in regards to that particular provision, which we felt gave us more time. It gave out to 2031 for the services to address this particular issue. Ultimately, when that bill got conferenced by the Senate and the House Armed Services Committee, that provision did not remain in the National Defense Authorization Act. However, when the National Defense Authorization Act was published, it also published this document, which was a joint explanatory statement of the NDAA. And I just want to show you two important sections. We're going to hang this on our website as well. What this says is that in Section 5 of the NDAA, this joint explanatory statement shall have the same effect with respect to the implementation of this legislation, as if it were a joint explanatory statement of a committee or a conference. And if you scroll all the way to page 425, and again, we'll put this on our website, this is really important because this is the Congress speaking on why that section was taken out. So this is the authorization to acquire through exchange or lease certain land used by the armed forces in Hawaii. So this tells you what was in Section 2831 of the Senate's version of the NDAA. It says the House bill did not contain a similar provision, which it did not, and that this agreement, which was the final conference version of the NDA that was sent to the president, did not include the Senate provision. However, this language is important. We note that this agreement does not include language that would authorize the purchase of land associated with or supporting PTA. We are concerned that the Army may pursue condemnation in 2025 prior to the 2029 land lease deadline in the vicinity of the Pōhakuloa training area before it has fully expended the opportunity for negotiation or achieved a coordinated compensation package within the various agencies of the executive branch. We note that the Army does not have the authority to acquire such lands and that attempting to do so would be contrary to congressional intent. So we therefore encourage the Army to fully develop and communicate with all its stakeholders, etc. And you can read that. This is important language because this is the United States Congress now signed into law by the President saying the United States Army did not have authorization to get ahead of itself on these land acquisitions, and that they must communicate with community, communicate with stakeholders, do it in an inclusive nature, and work with other various agencies of the executive branch that might have a role in this particular issue. So this document is as important as the NDAA itself, and that is a critical role that the United States Congress played. At the end of the day, your congressional delegation is vital on this issue. So Senator Schatz and Senator Hirono and Congressman Case and Congresswoman Tokuda. Congresswoman Tokuda sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Senator Hirono is on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Congressman Case is on the House Appropriations Committee with the military subcommittees of jurisdiction. And Senator Schatz sits on the Senate Appropriations Committee on the committees of jurisdiction. So they're very, very important on this issue. And every single one of you should make your voices heard to them so they understand how important it is for you, especially out here with Makua Valley. Of course, the Hawaii State Legislature, they have a critical role. We have some state legislators here tonight. Again, I would emphasize the constitutional amendment for live fire training this legislative session, and also amendments to HRS 17195, which I think are really important for the legislators to provide oversight over any land exchange of public trust land that exceed a certain acreage. Next slide. Judicial branch. So, you know, I don't know, Leonala, the judiciary is critical because of their role in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, which is the takings clause. This governs condemnation, and many of those claims are heard at the federal district court level here in Hawaii, or could make its way all the way to the Supreme Court. Leonala, anything else on the judicial branch and their particular role?
No, I think we covered kind of the legal protections that we have, and we actually were going to try and skip ahead to the community discussion. So I don't know if you want to wrap up anything else.
I think that's maybe it on this. Yeah, is there another slide? What else do we have?
There was one about OHA's actions to date, but I think we've talked about a lot of that already.
Let's see, what have we done today? Governor Advisory Board, we did our first community meeting. This is our second meeting here in Māʻili. We're going to go to Kauai in January because of PMRF. We'll be going to other presentations across the state. Of course, we have the legislative session convening on January 21st. And so, you know, we're doing as much as we can to advocate OHA's position on this particular issue. And as I mentioned before, we'll be establishing a permitted interaction group tomorrow at the OHA Board of Trustees. And then we'll be sending letters to the various different service secretaries to engage and request consultation. Now that the NDAA is law and OHA is explicitly named in the NDAA as an NHO, along with DHHL, that can be the representative voice for the Native Hawaiian people, we are asking to be consulted, along with the Department of Defense instruction that was issued several years ago that names OHA on this particular issue. And so we would like to get face-to-face meetings with the service secretaries or their designees here in Hawaii at U.S. Army Pacific or at the other service components, so we can start asserting our position on this particular issue. And part of our position is your position, is how you feel about this particular issue. And that's why this next part of tonight is really important to us, so that we can hear your concerns and what you think OHA should or should not be doing as it relates to this particular issue. Is there another slide?
Yeah, Emilio is going to scroll through these really quickly. They kind of visually illustrate the importance of what we're doing, because this is a star advertiser poll results that really differ from what we've been getting on our online survey. That's the QR code up there. So we see a majority of folks who did the star advertiser saying strike a deal quickly, just bulldoze through all the stages that we're talking about and try and get it done.
Who's taking our survey? Raise your hand. Yeah, so maybe less than 10% of this group please take our survey. It's super easy. You go to OHA's website, click on the Military Leased Lands, right here. Share your mana'o. Here's the survey. There's not very many questions. That's it. And we capture that information, and that informs us of how you feel as it relates to these specific questions. So please take our online survey. We have a QR code over there. If you want it, you can. Takes you probably 30 seconds to take it. You want to finish up the survey results?
We're just visually showing them.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. Okay. Yeah, and you know, we can deep dive into a whole bunch of other stuff. If you have a question, we're happy to take questions. You want to voice your concern, we're happy to hear that as well. For those that are listening, you can QR code it and take the survey as we're here right now. And also this is our contact information. We have launched this website, oha.org, at Aloha āina. And we have our email addresses if you want to email us directly. And yeah, this time is yours. So I think the best way to facilitate this is we'd like to hear from as many people that want to express their mana'o. You know, I don't want to set any like time limit on anyone, but I think to be reasonable to try to accommodate others in the room, you know, you determine how long that needs to be. I don't want to say you only got 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or I'm going to take away the mic from you. If you want to get up and you want to speak, you speak as long as you want, but realize that there's other people in the room that may want to speak too. And we also have a time limit that we have to leave here anyway, right? From community schools. What, 11 o'clock? What time? 8 o'clock. Nah, we can go a little bit later. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry.
Introduce yourself and go from there. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm the first one. My name is James Cowles. I'm a former military Marine. Tell your father, Semper Fi. I've been working off and on Makua Valley, along with other folks that are in attendance here tonight. My concern is they're talking about returning 1/3 of Makua Valley and 1/3 of Lulule. I don't believe in that. I think we should get all of it returned. Not just 1/3, all of it. And regardless of getting it cleaned up, we know the military is not going to get it cleaned up. I know, I was military. They should give us something for us to clean it up for them. I mean, even though they've used it over the years and years and years of bombing, I've been in the valley training. I also been on the Pōhakuloa. And I feel that the military should give the Hawaiian people that live on this side compensation for cleaning up that valley. And like I said before, I'll push it and I'll keep pushing it. I want the whole valley returned back to where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great feedback. And here's you know, a map that many of you are familiar with, but maybe some of you aren't. Right? This is Makua Valley, and the yellow land is the state-owned land, and the green land is the land that the federal government controls and owns in fee. What they have said in their EIS is that they are not going to pursue retention of the state-owned lands, the yellow lands, but make no mention of the rest of the lands and the federal lands, whether it's return, cleanup, restoration, etc. And so that's something to consider as well. Anyway, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Let me make it real easy. How many of you want all of Makua Valley returned? Okay, so you don't have to testify individually about that. I just want to acknowledge Auntie Frenchie, because the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, our own Auntie Frenchie,
Yep.
the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, she's known as the mother of Oʻahu. And for good reason, because she was there at the beginning, she lobbied, she used a lot of swear words to convince people. Okay, those of you that know Auntie Frenchie know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, I want to make a historical point. At the time that Kaho'olawe was being fought over, Makua was being fought over at the same time. Okay? And when Kaho'olawe was returned, Auntie Frenchie sent me to Pīkio, and I said, okay, remember the kind of deal that we made that after Kaho'olawe was back, because we were going to help you, we couldn't fight two at one time? Now it's Makua's time. I'm going to tell you what I was told. Oh, sorry, bro. We cannot make too much waves right now because we're waiting on funding to come for Kaho'olawe. So we can help you guys behind the scenes, but we cannot be in the front protesting with you guys. Okay, remember that. Waianae people remember that. Okay. The committee that myself and I don't see her, but you there she is. Mahina sit on. We've had one meeting so far, sort of an introductory meeting. The one thing that we've made very, very clear to the governor is that the process has to be transparent and there has to be a lot more public input. So what you're going through, what the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is going through is precisely and follow the law. Correct? Okay. And then we want all the valley back. We want it managed as one unit. We want it to go to a public land trust. We want the military to give us an endowment of a minimum of $500 million. Right? You put that in an investment account, you get 10%, that's $50 million a year. You get 5%, that's $5 million a year. That's $20 million a year. Okay? With that money, we want to do the cleanup. We do not want the army to clean up. We do not want Kaho'olawe again. We want a 50-year plan. We want to hire you young folks to become experts. We want to create a area of excellence and an economic driver for the community. That's the vision for Makua. That's what we want. So please, OHA, help us. Help us push that message to them. And then you young folks, when that happens, get ready. We're going to come looking for you guys to help us manage the restoration. Okay? I'm glad to see all you young guys here tonight. I know a lot of you have been involved in a lot of things, so mai ka'iloa. And thank you, Summer. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Aloha, mai kako.
Aloha.
We are now at 132 years of American occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom. This attempt to renew leases to the U.S. military is illegal in international law and is a war crime. If the American military in Hawaii complied with the international law of occupation when Queen Liliuokalani conditionally surrendered to the United States on January 17, 1893, the occupation would not have lasted to this very day, 130 years later. Consequently, everything since 1893 that derives from American authority that would otherwise be valid within U.S. territory is invalid and void in Hawaiian territory because the United States has not been vested with Hawaiian sovereignty by a treaty of cession. International humanitarian law recognizes that the proxies of the occupying state, in Hawaii's case, the illegal state of Hawaii, which are in effective control of the territory of the occupied state, are obligated to administer the laws of the occupied state. The state of Hawaii and its county governments, and not the federal government, meet this requirement of effective control of Hawaiian territory under Article 42 of the 1907 Hague Regulations, and need to immediately comply with the law of occupation. The United States has been in violation of international law for over a century, exercising since 1890 the longest running belligerent occupation of a foreign country in the history of international relationships without establishing an occupying government. As a subject of the Hawaiian Kingdom, who is not an American, as people born within the occupied territory cannot acquire citizenship of the occupier and can only acquire citizenship through parentage, I am committed to bringing justice to my country, the Hawaiian Kingdom, by bringing compliance to the law of occupation, and I am deeply concerned that the international humanitarian law continues to be flagrantly violated with apparent impunity by the state of Hawaii and the county governments. This has led to the commission of war crimes and human rights violations on a colossal scale throughout the Hawaiian Islands. International criminal law recognizes that civilian inhabitants of the Hawaiian Islands are protected persons who are afforded protections under international humanitarian law, and their rights are vested in international treaties. There are no statutes of limitation for war crimes, as you must be aware. So I urge you to comply with, to not be complicit in committing war crimes, and demand from Governor Green to work with the head of the Hawaii National Guard to proclaim the transformation of the state of Hawaii and its counties into an occupying government, pursuant of the Council of Regency's proclamation of June 3rd, 2019, in order to administer the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom. This would include carrying into effect the Council of Regency's proclamation on October 10, 2014, that bring the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom into the 19th century up to date. I further urge you and the other officials of the state of Hawaii and its counties to familiarize with the contents of the e-book entitled Operational Plan for Transitioning the State of Hawaii into the Military Government, and the operational plan from transitioning the military government into the Hawaiian Kingdom government, published by the Council of Regency. Which addresses the essential tasks with their implied task for successful execution despite the prolonged nature of the occupation, where the basic rules of occupation have been violated for over a century. The operational plan will lay out governing rules maintaining a military government until a peace treaty has been negotiated and agreed upon between the Hawaiian Kingdom and the United States of America. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Aloha. Davis Price. I'm a West Oʻahu resident, live in Kapolei. And just full disclosure, I've worked. I'm trained as a lawyer. I graduated from Richardson. I've focused my studies on Native Hawaiian rights, environmental law. I interned at OHA when I was a young student. I worked at OHA for a number of years, both inside OHA and outside OHA. And then, since for the last 6 years now, since I left OHA, I've been working, so I was cutting my teeth as a public policy advocate, if you will. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with national and local nonprofits to develop our community and alternatives to the current system when it comes to management of our resources, building economic power and independence and resilience, and learning how to win these battles in a different way, building on the legacy of our ancestors and our kupuna and our makua who have won many battles. But the lessons I think that we learn is you don't win every fight the same way. And so it's important for us to take note of that as we approach this battle, because it is a battle. And I think that's what's missed in the last few months is it's being portrayed as simply this deal between the almighty powerful U.S. military and the governor of Hawaii, seemingly to try to convince us all that they can execute this deal. That's wrong, and thank you folks for sharing the factual legal history in this way, and for taking the risk and making the sacrifice to go out in the community and engage in this way as well, because these are emotional issues, and it's tough work. Been there. So mahalo nui to you folks, and mahalo to all for doing the necessary work in the last few months to really counter what the governor has been doing, because it's not in the best interest of the people of Hawaii generally, let alone the Native Hawaiian people. And so I think to try and add to what you folks have presented today, I think what's really important, and I think all that legal history is very important, it gives us kind of the framework for what's possible in a very narrow focus right in front of us. However, we need to meet the moment, and we need our community to be empowered to think bigger, beyond the scope of this legal framework, because that's what's going to get us the victory. The victory being land back, The victory being what you touched on, Kai, in the very beginning, is this is about land, power, and control. Absolutely, 100%. And I think the feelings that many of us feel when we see that presentation is the feeling that the triggered emotional response is the feeling of dominance and powerlessness, because the way the military operates in Hawaii. And what we have with this situation is an opportunity to challenge that, to reshape that relationship, to treat the military as a tenant, not as the master. And so that's first and foremost. And when the military is treated as the tenant, the people of Hawaii have the power. And we do still have that power. And regardless of all of the powerful institutions and structures and systemic legacies that were recited in that presentation, ultimately it comes down to political will. Ko'olave does not get returned without the people taking a stand. Mauna Kea does not, we don't stop telescopes for the purpose of getting control back of that āina without people taking a stand. And ultimately, what is the stand? The stand right now is looking back at that entire precedent and history that starts with the USS Boston, 160 soldiers pointing their guns at our queen. That's the moment of reckoning that we're in. We cannot lose sight of that. That's the institution that's coming to us, people of Hawaii, saying, we need this land. Well, let's rock and roll. And let's start with the position and what community's role is in this whole structure. That OHA that you're presenting is to hold a line so that you can take the strongest possible stance to make sure that we get the outcome as close as we can that is most beneficial for the people of Hawaii. And that is less military control, decreased footprint, 100% cleanup. You cannot put a price tag on this like the governor tried to do without any due diligence. We need to know what is the cost of cleanup. We need to know what is the cost of generational impacts that started with the guns pointed at the queen. We need to know what is the cost of back rent. What is the cost of having unjust $1 a year leases? That's the single most harmful element of this whole dynamic. And I'll close with this. When a system can devalue our most valuable, and it's not even a commodity, they commodified it, our kupuna, our most valuable resource, our āina, to $1 a year, free use, and then bomb them. What is that rest of that system, the fallout going to be? It's everything you struggle with. Everything we struggle with. The same system that allows people to go with no more food and live on the beach. The same system that makes you dependent on the system and then cuts off your SNAP benefits and uses it as a bargaining chip. It starts with the free use of land, commodification of our kupuna. We've got to put that to an end, and we've got to challenge it. And I'll just say that the community going to organize. As long as OHA, we can stay in alignment, we're going to win. We're going to get our land back. And it's not going to be just Makua. That's done. Makua coming back. No doubt. We want Pōhakuloa back. And we want a plan to get Pu'uloa back, for that matter. So, mahalo, gang. Aloha.
Thank you, Davis. As we get our next testifier up, I would be remiss if I didn't also recognize some of our sitting state legislators that are here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. We got Rep. Kanani Souza, mahalo, Rep. Darius Kila, Garner Shimizu, Kaika Hasi. Anyone else I miss? Thank you. 4 of the 51 members of the State House of Representatives here tonight, and going to be in very, very important roles in a few weeks in the new year. So thank you for coming and listening. Go ahead. Thank you.
Aloha. Okalani ko'u inoa. Kind of nervous, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. So we know that the sons of the missionaries went take over. So we go use scripture to call them out. So Exodus 20:17 says, "Thou shalt not covet." Exodus 20:16 says, "Thou shalt not lie." Exodus 20:15 says thou shalt not steal. But all of this stuff has happened to our people. So in the Kue petitions, we got 2 or 3 witnesses, and we said we never liked, but they stole us anyway. So I'm here to say Isaiah 10, woe to you guys that pass evil statutes. How will you hide your face from the Father of all creation? Why are our people the highest homelessness, the highest sickness, the highest child or family separations? Our people are crying out, and it's time that we make a stand. So I go use Exodus 5:1, the last one. And Moses went into Pharaoh and he said, let my people go. Mahalo.
Aloha kako. O Nani Brown ko inoa. Oh, I'm nervous too now. I want to get a few things out of the way first. I want to say that I do hold true that Hawaiians without āina equates to a very slow genocide. And by taking our land, you are taking our people. I want to also get out of the way that the idea that the USA gets to be some arbiter of morals is ridiculous on its face, especially in this moment. And, well, I'm glad, everybody in this room, we're all on the same page. We all want the military gone. We definitely don't want no live fire. And so my proposition is that we all come in the way that our ancestors called us, or whatever called you. And so right here we have our litigators in American law, which we know we have ways out of this, and none of this should have happened anyway because we were a sovereign nation. We have the international law on our side, and mahalo for everybody who can come for us in that space. And then we have the rest of us, or a lot of us, that are ready to be boots on the ground and hold the line. And we just keep hitting them in waves. While you guys are litigating, we're pumping up, we're holding the line. While they're litigating on an international stage, we're holding the line. And when they come for us at TMT again, we're holding the line. Because for some of us, we just got a hold of our Hawaiian identity. And we are not letting it go. Not again.
Aloha, Chanel Ko'uinoa. Hi, Kaikahele, pilot, politician, lieutenant colonel, combat veteran, and OHA chair. Nice to meet you. I stand before you today as a member of Navahine Ko'i. I know you know who we are. You're very familiar with us. All of these systems that have been put up by these nonprofit organizations, by OHA, just doesn't work anymore. So I'm here as a person that is a part of Navahine Ko'i to tell you and to tell everybody else, if you guys tired of sitting in these rooms, listening to people like this, going in circles and circles and circles, we are Wahine, Mahu, and Kane who have a voice of our own, that can speak on our own, that hold the line on our own. So I need you to listen to this from me right now because it's very important. I'm nervous, but the people I speak for are not. My kupuna want me to tell you that this is hewa. What is going on is hewa. And me personally, I feel like it is a conflict of interest for you to stand up here and be a part of the military and then tell us that we're getting our land back from the military, which we really don't know if we are. So the trust in you isn't stable, but the trust in people with the ground roots and the koko and the mana are here. Not only me, not only the community, but our kupuna are watching you, and they are not proud. Mahalo.
Aloha o wau hi'ilani no le imaiau no hoau I makakilo hanau I lualua lei. So I don't have any mana'o. Well, of course I have mana'o, but everyone has beautifully already shared it already, and I cannot say what you guys are already saying without diluting the mana and the meaning behind it. So I do have a few questions. Kind of leading off Tita back there, what are your thoughts on the military, the U.S. military? Okay. So I work in Lu'u'u'ulei, and unfortunately, as an organic farmer, and unfortunately, we do hear a lot of bombing, and I have seen a few chemtrails from over the mountains on the Schofield Barracks side. Is there anything being done for the live fire or the military occupation over there? Are those, like, no? Alrighty. For what you guys mentioned about Kaula, NASA working to get a lease on that island, is that for Elon Musk's projects, for him trying to dump all of his space machinery? The United States controls Kaula. Alrighty. Okay. Oh, was that not mentioned earlier about? Are we able to do anything about that? About getting that island back? Kaula.
Sure. I mean, it could be part of the land back information that we presented.
All right.
Yeah. Any land that's controlled by the federal government can be part of land back and returned back to the state of Hawaii.
All righty. Including over Schofield and Pu'uloa, hopefully?
Sure.
All righty.
Everything.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that there should be that I think it was Oʻahu or the state should have legislature over lands exceeding a certain amount. Why would we not be allowed to have, or you guys be allowed to have legislature or oversight over lands under that certain amount? Is there like 1,000 acres? How come we can't get oversight for anything less?
Well, let's say as an example, if the city and county of Honolulu wanted to exchange a 10-acre parcel with the state of Hawaii, public lands as it's controlled by BLNR to develop affordable housing, would we want that to go in front of the legislature for approval? I'm asking you a question.
Well, I think it would just depend on the reasoning for the leasing.
Affordable housing.
All right. Well, that would be okay, but I'm asking about any other type of oversight.
You could ask the state legislator.
I can give you a little bit different answer if it's helpful, but a lot of the county and state exchanges have to do with like easement for utilities
Right of
that are
ways.
governed by that statute. So if we were to say every single transaction between the county and the state had to go through the legislature, the amendment's not gonna pass for one deal because it would hold everything up.
Not to mention the legislature is only in session for about 4 months.
Yeah.
From January through May.
But that's a lot of them. It's basically like utility lines and stuff. So it's kind of a practical solution to still having oversight over large land transactions without, making it so difficult to even have those kinds of easements for water, electricity, all that stuff. Because
and all of the land lease parcels exceed thousands of acres. So Pōhakuloa is 22,000 acres. PMRF is over 8,000 acres. The Oʻahu training lands, I believe, are at least over 1,000 acres. And so this would provide legislative oversight if BLNR wants to exchange land with the federal government that are 5F public trust lands. That would allow the state legislature that would at the very least require a simple majority of the legislature to approve of that transaction, not just allow the BLNR to unilaterally make that decision at the executive branch level. So it provides legislative branch oversight over potentially alienating or dispossessing public trust land, which, as we mentioned earlier, is lands that form the Crown and Government lands corpus established in the Great Mahele.
Okay. So for the HRS 175-95, how can we make a difference? You guys said you wanted to change that. Is there a way we can start a petition or a movement?
You got 4 state reps right here.
I would also encourage you, our OHA website, we have our all the different bills, not just our bills, but update people about important legislation that's moving at the legislative branch. So the advocacy division, our website is oha.org/advocacy. So that's one way that you can stay informed about different things happening at the legislature.
And you can just go and look at HRS 17150, yeah, Linala? 50, and compare it to HRS 17195. The protections in 50 is what you want in 95. Okay. Any land exchange between the state and the United States falls under 17195. And I showed you the resolution where even the deal on ours said that 17195 is controlling. So we feel that 17195 should be strengthened to provide the oversight that the legislature could have over a land exchange that exceeds a certain acreage. Because we know the acreage that the United States wants to retain are thousands of acres. It's not housing. It's not for a public purpose that we feel would be worthy of a major land exchange between the state and the federal government. That makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and I just have one last question. Thank you for all your grace. Sorry, Kalama, if I'm a little uneducated, but how do you think the new presidency, how do you think that they would affect this?
That's an excellent question. So about 2 weeks ago, the president issued the national security strategy. It is a very important document. You can Google it, you can download it, it's probably 30 pages. It is the President of the United States' overarching vision for the United States' role throughout the world, foreign affairs. It is the governing document for the Department of State that dictates how the United States will treat its relations with foreign governments and throughout the world. And in that national security strategy, it's a major, this is the Trump NSS. It's a major pivot from the previous NSS, which was issued by the Biden administration. And what generally the president is saying that over the next 3 years, the United States is going to focus more on the Western Hemisphere. They are going to invoke the Monroe Doctrine, which focuses on the West rather than being a global, arbiter for in the case that some have used. It changes relations with the People's Republic of China. Rather than major military buildups in the Indo-Pacific, it's emphasizing trade and more warmer relations. I would encourage you to read that document. It got a lot of feedback when it came out, and Secretary Hegseth, about a few days later at the Reagan National Defense Forum, spoke about it. Why that's important is, if that is the vision of this president and this administration, at least through 2028, then we shouldn't have a massive buildup of military forces in the Indo-Pacific, whether it's in Hawaii or the Philippines or in Australia or in Okinawa. If we are pivoting away from military buildups and significant military relations in the Indo-Pacific and focusing more inward in the Western Hemisphere, one would argue then, why do you need a large military presence in the Hawaiian Islands? Why do you need Pōhakuloa for live fire military training when it's not your intent and purpose to use those weapons in a Taiwan conflict or a PRC type conflict? And what role does the Army play in that potential Western theater of battle? So that's an important document to take a look at. And that document will have an impact on the national defense strategy, which should be issued in the next month or so. And that will be coming from the Secretary of Defense, on the national defense strategy of the United States. So it's a good question. And I would argue that it should play into this decision in Hawaii and what Hawaii's role plays in that.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you
That's
again,
great.
you and Lena Ala. Thank you guys for all you do, and all of Oha, and thank all of you guys for all you do, especially Nawahine Ko'i, Malama Makua, everyone. Thank you all for everything. E ola.
Thank you.
Mele Kalikimaka is the thing to say on this beautiful Oha Hawaiian day. My name is Pikachu Shelby Billionaire, and I have to start with compliments before I go hard. So thank you for talking about allodial title and breaking it down from 1893. We are on Facebook Live. We got the legislator to break it all down and discuss. If you guys don't know, allodial title goes back to England. So you don't lose the land. We don't own the land, even though you're related to King Kamehameha 3, 2, and 1. However, we do have undivided interest. In order to file the paperwork, which is missing, you have to go to the Bureau of Conveyance and file your paperwork. Don't put it under your personal name because they can steal it with eminent domain. Put it in your own trust. So thank you for sharing about all of the HRS 171-95. And I talked to Rep. Shamiz on the back right there and a couple other people, and it makes sense what you're saying. So for the younger people out there who don't engage as much, you can email everybody. You can email the military people for the state legislature side, Senate, and House. I already emailed Chair Kai and all the OHA trustees. I'm the kind of guy that will call the Department of War. Pete Heg Kukai, yes, I called his office to see what are they going to do, because we've got a whole bunch of mad Hawaiians, and the military wants another probably renewal of the lease for $1 for 65 years. Same thing I'll tell you guys, same thing I told Don Chang. I will pay you 300%. I got $3 in my wallet, 12 quarters. I will 300% buy out all those leased lands for 300% more. Because it doesn't make sense when you start bringing up this logic. So I want to thank you for bringing it up, because when you're talking about Pete Hegseth, who did the foul paw and killed the people in Venezuela, I got activated for war September 12, 2001. I joined the Air Force just like Kai, because I didn't want to run like the Marines. They would probably make me run too much. They call us the chair force to let you know, but we're really good at paperwork. We are #1, and we also have AI. So what I would do with all of your intel now, I'm going to run it by AI, then put some draft proposals to the legislatures, so hopefully they can pick it up. But we're going to need help because we can't do it alone. Now, about the valuation, because I used to invest in real estate, how much is per square foot, right? But because of that stipulation, reading the fine print, the BLNR/DNR says they don't have to pay fair market rent. That definitely needs to be amended, because it's not fair for the kids of the future generations. I feel my concern is that when the 65 years, 2020, President Donald Trump said he still wants to be a president. You can only do that through war. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen again, because as you know, Indo-Pacific Command, back when I was in, was just Camp Smith. So you got Taiwan. If you guys know Indo-Pacific Command, that controls the world's largest oceanic trade. And the Hawaiian Islands were the center. So if China hits Taiwan and you're already Japan, we have issues, plus everything else around the world. And when you're looking at that timeline, you're missing out, World War I and World War II. And so we're not getting all these issues addressed like you heard from the younger generations. I'm sure you're going to hear from the older generations and the Kapuna. And let us know, Chair Kai and you guys, what can the public do to best assist you guys? Because we're not getting the 20% that's supposed to be from the funds from the state legislature. Governor Josh Green have 25, let's just say $26 billion this year. You guys did not get the 20%. Actually, we never got the 20% ever in my recorded universe of life, which isn't that long. And so I don't trust them, just like you guys. I think they're going to play some switcheroo games, that condemnation, and we're not going to get Jack in the crack. And Josh Green is afraid. That's why he's like, hey, we're going to make a deal and negotiate, because they might just take it through eminent domain, which I don't want to see. Because what they're using to train, they trained me in the Air Force, is that they're training the guys to kill other people in foreign countries. I'm not sure that's what you guys want, but I don't want that, even though I joined. We didn't know about all this Iraq war, the lies, the WMDs, what they're saying with Israel, Palestine, all this stuff, all this genocide. And I feel for the people of Guam, Puerto Rico, and ourselves too, because they're suffering just as much as us. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
While we're waiting for the next person to come up, I just recalled what Uncle Bill said, and he talked about Makua, and he talked about remediation and the community playing a major role in that. If you go to, if it comes up, well, it'll come up. If you go to congress.gov or you just Google the Leandra Vai Act, one of the founding members of Malama Makua, HR 7130 was introduced in the 117th Congress, and this is the blueprint for Makua's complete and total return, exactly, for the most part, how Bill Ayla described it. And this is congress.gov, this is the bill. If you click on the text and you click on the PDF copy of the bill, this outlines much of the things that Bill had talked about, not just the state land, but all of the federal lands, all of the cleanup, the history of the valley, and what the United States would be doing to convey the necessary resources for the full restoration of Makua Valley. And so this can serve as a blueprint for the total return of Makua, and it can also serve as a vehicle in the current Congress that our current and existing congressional delegation can look at. So, I mean, that would be a great question to ask. I mean, who is your state or your U.S. representative for this district? Takuda. What's her position on this bill? You should ask, because that's the total return of Makua Valley. And I worked on this bill with Earth Justice and several other really important individuals on this bill. It's not perfect, but it has many of the frameworks that Bill had talked about. So that's that piece. And then finally, the second piece is, I talked about the permitted interaction group that we're going to establish tomorrow at Oʻahu. There's 8 things that we're going to work on. Or 6 things. One of those things is putting together this group of technical advisors that will advise the Board of Trustees and be a part of this community-driven process. And it includes the OPIO, the next generation of Native Hawaiian leaders, because that is very, very important to Oʻahu and its board. And so we're trying to be very thoughtful in who serves on this technical advisory group that can advise the Board of Trustees and the negotiating permitted interaction group as we begin to negotiate Oʻahu's position on these leased lands, with the ultimate goal, wherever Davis went, of land back. Want the land back. So how do we achieve that? And that's going to be established hopefully tomorrow with the Board of Trustees. Leonala, did you have anything on that? No? Okay, great. Okay.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I am my father's daughter. His name is Kanako, O'o ni Aupio. My name is Luella Leonardi. I'm a president of Waianae Valley Hawaiian Homestead. Okay, I just wanted to go over the time. My Tutu ladies are descendants of the ancient Tahiti. And I guess the war, Nu'uanu war, was very much so a part of our family. And bits and pieces came down. So I just wanted to start off with that particular war. I want to move on to the next war, and that is World War II. My father, 1845 Maunawili Road, the military came onto his property, held a gun to his head, and did martial law. I was very blessed that my tutuman, Keleleki, as well as Henry Okazaki, they saved my dad's life back then. Let me move on some more. Okay, my grandfather, he was at Enuita in 1951. He was very angry as to what was going on there, seeing all the atomic bombs going off. That he called home to my grandmother and he said, "Does anybody pregnant? If so, could you name a child Marshall?" And that's my brother. And then my cousin's name is Kwajalein, so that we never forget the 64 atomic bomb that they bombed Marshall Islands and Kwajalein. 1974, I have to say to all of you, 1974, our mothers got tired of what was going on Hawaiian Homestead. Statewide, our mothers got together and they were learning for 4 years about ceded lands. For 4 years. And they were part of the 1978 CONCON. And I have to stress here, Hawaiian Homestead lost that night. They lost, okay? We didn't win. ʻOʻahu came in, and they took everything. Okay, so on the last night of 1978 CONCON, my mother brought everyone over to my house, and I live in Hauʻula. And they all came to my house. They were all sitting on the floor. The persons that were sitting on the floor is Auntie Lena, Ho'ohuli, my mother, I believe it was Marie Olson, Danette Rayford, Bonnie Victor, Uncle Joe Tassel, and a few more from different islands. They were all sitting on the floor. Okay, Mitz Urihara was the lawyer, and he opened up the book, the general revenues, and it was $14 million. That was public trust lands, $14 million. Now, what Mitz advised us, being the fact that we lost, he advised us to hold on to the blood quantum. And I looked at him and I'm going like, why are we going to hold on to the blood quantum? Who wants to produce with another Hawaiian just to produce the next generation and the next generation? My rules were back then, you love who you marry who you love, right? But Mitz said, if we wanted to still exist, we needed to hold on to that blood quantum. So I'm sitting there and my jaws are just going like, I'm kind of upset. But then I took a look at my mother's face and I said to myself, wait a minute. My mom is very sad and broken. I said, this is it. I'm taking over. And yes, I did. The last night of the 1978 CONCON, I took over. People, it's been 50 years. 50 years, every day, 24/7. For me, 50 years. There isn't anything goes on out there that I don't know about. I know a lot of pain and a lot of suffering that we Hawaiian homesteaders go through, so that the general public and the women legal voters could have their Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation and they can have their vote. So we need to really, really think what we're doing tonight. We're going up against the military, but we need to take a look at coming together. Now, I know Auntie Frenchie. I fought with her the whole time. So Auntie Frenchie was trying to do an umbrella. We knew back then that vote was going to mess us up, and it did, and it still is. The general public and us Hawaiians. Now, ʻOʻahu said they were Hawaiians back then, and we looked at them and we said, okay, we Hawaiians, you Hawaiians, that's your definition. Your definition was not Native Hawaiian. Your definition became Native Hawaiian. And you took the larger N and you gave us, for me to see that on the screen, that lowercase n. And to live here out in Waianae as the lowercase n, while you all at ʻOʻahu are the uppercase n. Let me hurry up here, sorry. Going off here, sorry. Okay, I talked about 1974. This here, I was a student at UH Manoa for 10 years. I lived in the upper part of UH Manoa and Halilaulima for 10 years of my life in the dorms. This map is from Hamilton. This map I don't believe exists. And the reason why is because we had a, the rain came and took all the bottom of the maps, right. So this map is a military map of all the military lands on the island of Oʻahu. This map here is a military map that was produced from Makua. I am a geographer. I went to college and I graduated in 1993. Thanks to Cal Poly Pomona, I came out with an ArcInfo, was my teachers, my instructors. I'm a cartography, remote sensing, GIS, infrared person, specialty. But I only have a BA, thanks to Cal Poly and jet propulsion and Caltech. I have all those skills. But let me keep going. Sorry, guys. So we did 1974. In 1978, I went to Kaho'olawe. It was horrible. We did Public Law 95341, which is President Carter's freedom of religion. We're on it, Native Hawaiians, Aleut Eskimos, and Native American. So we had to do the access to Kaho'olawe on that Public Law 95341. We went to Kealaikahiki, walked over to Honokanainai, and then the next morning, we slept, and then the next morning, I woke up, and I think we walked, I don't know where we walked to see those three triangles, the three islands and the triangle. Then we walked up the Pu'amai'iwi, which is the top of the mountain, only to see this huge bomb sitting on top of Pu'amai'iwi. And that is an adze quarry. Then we walked all the way out to Hakiawaba, and then I turned around and walked back. Blessing that I landed in Uncle Harry Mitchell's arms. It was horrible because we ended up at Molokai 2 weeks later, and we did the consent decree, the Walter Heen's consent decree. And I hope it's part of your opposite's argument when you talk about Kaho'olawe. And the reason being, if you take a look at the consent decree, which I have here tonight, the consent decree here that we got to see and hear about through Ron Albu and Cynthia Thielen was on it, on the consent decree, that they were adding to Walter Heen's consent decree, it states that the military can bomb. Now, what happened here 2 weeks after we came home from Kaho'olawe, we were at Ali'i Beach. The Kupunas came in and they voted for the consent decree. They did not even read it. That it said right there what we were voting for, which is why I'm pointing this out because of what you're talking about, live fire. That's really important to understand. That when we vote, please read. That's the missing link here tonight. Please read. Let me move on. Sorry guys, taking too long. Okay. Okay, I'm also the keeper of the ku and hina from Tahiti, from the time of Tahiti time. Ku is stability. Ku is tu. Ku is not ru. Ru and hina came here on their vote, on their va'a from Tahiti. Ru and hina, brother and sister. But what I do is I access the Marine base once a year since 1978 to do the ritual at Pyramid Rock for ku and hina. That's what I do, and I just did it just about a couple of months ago. One more thing here, and that falls under Public Law 95341. The other part here, I have a docket, people. I have a docket, William. I have a docket, and you know about that docket. 2009 and 2010. I went before the Pentagon, Thaddeus Davis, in court with Judge Beretta and Judge Kennedy of the Atomic Energy Commission. This is all out of pocket that I do. And we were trying to stop the 900 tons of nuclear debris being trucked out to Makua to be used as a fire lane to go from Mauka to Makai. 2 fire lanes. That meets the Nuclear Regulatory Agency's rules. To go up against Gregory Jacot and Thaddeus Davis, it was really, really difficult to do. Again, I have a docket. It's not an easy task to go through. And that needs to be looked in when it comes down to Makua and Pōhakuloa. Because yes, Ching was there. Yes, he was there. And he's the one that taught me downwind. Downwinders. We in Waianae are all downwinders. But wait a minute. Take a look at U-230, U-235, U-236. It's heavy metals. I had our children are breathing in all this depleted uranium that is coming down Kula. They're breathing it in. There are SpongeBobs for the military. And for those of you who do not want to know about depleted uranium, they breathe it in because the depleted uranium is very heavy metal, and it just goes up where the tire of your car is. And our children are breathing it in. This is just wrong. And that's why we need a downwinders case out here in Waianae. This is so wrong. PVT. PVT, people, is a depleted uranium dump site. And our children are breathing this in. When the military bomb, hello, when do they bomb? When the wind is blowing this way. Take a look at Thaddeus Davis, what he did here. 3 meetings with Thaddeus Davis here in the community. 3 meetings. We have depleted uranium all up along Waianae, all up along our coastline. Thaddeus Davis did a bunker and a buffer. You need to know what bunker and buffer is. And that's what Thaddeus Davis from the Pentagon did here. Aside from trying to clean up all the ordnance from World War II of 123 miles.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We need to wrap up for tonight. I want to call Mahina to come up because our time is at 8:30, but I want to introduce you if you don't know Mahina Paishan, and she serves like Bill Isla does on Governor Green's advisory committee. I just wanted to give her a chance to share some mana'o before we got to leave.
Mahalo. He aloha wale no keia I ko mauna ku kila o ka'ala na akua na aumakua e kia iana I keia aina kamaha'o keia aina uluwehi o Waianae no hoi. He kamawau no Nana Kuli, 3rd Road, Paishans, right next to the Beasleys and the Mohoys. Didn't get to spend too much time here, but have ohana that are in the homestead. Just a couple of things. One is that this advisory committee is your committee. I am very mina that that the state has yet to publicly commit to a meaningful, robust, comprehensive, real community engagement process. And I want to say very clearly that is not the intent of any of the Kanaka that are sitting on this advisory to supplant or subvert our shared desire and the requirement of the state to engage us meaningfully. So that is not our purpose. Is to be, we are basically just sitting there so that we can receive your folks' mana'o. Part of the problem is we collectively as Oʻahu, we need to figure out how do we collect our collective mana'o. We're just one little seat. The seats belong here, right here in these moku and these conversations. Chair, I would love to work with whatever data that comes out of your survey. And from the feedback from, I've been watching, this is the second, so I watched the first one too. This is just one vehicle to collect input, but we need a more comprehensive across the entire āina so that we are just one. We don't want to be the only, we should be lesser. We are just one voice. However, we want to, like sister over here, a couple of you were saying we need to strategic coordinate. Some of us is going to be front line, some of us is going to be leading edge, like the tip of the spear. Some of us is going to be coordinating with legislators, as legislators. Some of us are going to be community advocates. We all have a role to play. And so I have two things that I want to leave with you. One is that we, myself and a few of the community representatives that are on the committee, Uncle William Aila, Auntie Noi Noi, Wong Wilson, we stated and put on the record, Summer Silva, of course, we stated and put on the record at the very first meeting that the governor needs to review the 5 points that were delivered by a sign-on declaration of 39 organizations that actually Davis and others, I think Ilima also helped with that, others stated, and I'll just enumerate them again. Number one, in this sign-on joint declaration of 39 Native Hawaiian organizations, include Native Hawaiian community representation in decision-making. Again, we don't see this, the Governor's Advisory Committee, as the representation. It should be just a small, minor part in something that should be much more comprehensive, and mahalo to Chair and to Oha, who's going to create this PIG, who's yet another Pōhaku, not the mechanism, but another Pōhaku. Number two, vigorously pursue the cleanup and return of all lands leased to the military. Number three, center accountability, oversight, and restitution. Number four, follow the law. And number five, commit to transparency and consent. So there is a second meeting that is going to take place next week. My understanding is that Governor is going to participate in that meeting, and we will see. My number one message, again, with these 5 points, the number one message that I am saying again and again and again and again on the record is that the state, Governor Green, needs to assure that there is a meaningful, comprehensive community engagement process that will be conducted to assure all of our voices, not to supplant OHA's process that has already been conducted, but it needs to be, they have a responsibility to all of us. So that is what I'm going to deliver. And whatever way that we collectively can think about how we can collect everyone's mana'o so that we can just help to represent, it's just another venue to represent our mana'o for our āina, for land back. That is the only reason why I sit on that chair. One last thing, my biggest concern is that if we don't come up with a process, Hawaii, for us to debate these issues, my biggest concern is that we are going to be pitted one moku against another moku. I live in Hawaii Island. I have family members that love and care for Pōhakuloa. And I would hate to see us negotiating one cherished land for another cherished land. We cannot. They will break us if that happens. So, Lahui, this is, as Brother Davis and many of you have shared, whether in your na'au or vocally today, this is our moment to come together, work with OHA, work with all of you as community advocates, work with the 39 organizations that have already come together, work with the kupuna and makua that have given their lives and committed to this, to justice and to healing and to our collective ea. Oh yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Mahina. We've got to be mindful of the Kamehameha schools and this space they gave us tonight. You know, on behalf of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Lena Ala, and myself, thank you so much for coming tonight. You know, no, we got. They told us we got to go at 8:30. Thank you. Good night.